And welcome back to another edition of the OHIO podcast. Welcome to our first Big Ten preview of the 2024 season. The Fighting Illini lead us off, Chris, here in our 2024 previews by the OHIO podcast. I'm your host, Buckeye Boggs. That man over there is the wild man, Chris Wilds. Chris, this is year number 3 or 4 of our previews. Four? Okay. We've been doing this now for our 4th season, and I think we have down pat kind of the structure that I like. And so here's what we're going to do tonight. We're going to take a quick look at Illinois' season last year, as well as basically their football program, and just a quick glance at them historically. I have an interview from Ryan Evan from the Keeping It Orange and Blue podcast, our sister podcast on the College Huddle, the Illinois podcast on the College Huddle. After that interview, Chris and I are going to come back, and then we're going to discuss the projected starting lineup for Illinois, and then we're going to get into their schedule, and then predicting how we think they're going to do in 2024. So that's kind of the lineup that we're going to use this year, the template for all 18 Big Ten teams, and Illinois is up first. Chris, are you ready?
Let's go with it.
All right. Let's start off with a little bit of a history lesson and how the Fighting Illini did last year in 2023. Chris, they were 5-7 overall last year. They were 3-6 in the Big Ten. Some real close games, including the very first one where they just clipped Toledo at home, 30-28. That was an interesting game. They lost to Purdue. They got absolutely demolished in West Lafayette, 44-19. They lost to Nebraska. They were able to somehow beat Maryland, 27-24. I think Maryland was coming off a loss to Ohio State.
Mm-hmm.
They lose to Wisconsin. They won a 1-point game on the road at Minnesota. They won a 3-point game over Indiana before losing to Iowa and Northwestern and failing to become bowl eligible in 2023. Last year, Vegas said that they were a 6.5 win team. I went 6-6 last year with them, so I was correct. Chris, you took the over at 7.5, so you were incorrect with that. But Vegas was nailed it. We finished right around where they, as far as what they thought there, and of course they only got to 5 wins, so it was an under year for the Illini. Brett Bielema returns this year for his 4th season, Chris. He's 18-19 overall as the head coach of the Fighting Illini. Of course, they play in Champaign, Illinois at Memorial Stadium that seats 60,670. The all-time record for Illinois is 626 wins, 623 losses, and 50 ties. Their all-time bowl record is 8-11, and they have 15 Big Ten conference titles. Chris, your overview of Illinois as a program historically and how they did last year.
Last year I was really disappointed. I really feel like this was a team that had more talent than what they showed on the field. And as much as we like to make fun of Brett Bielema, I really do consider him, a pretty good coach. So I was a little disappointed where they finished last year, but you know what? This is a team that I really feel like, given the fact that they're in Illinois, they should be recruiting a little bit better than they do, given all the talent specifically around the Chicagoland area.
And they're not far from St. Louis.
They're not far from St. Louis, exactly. And, I just feel like they are underachieving right now, but I really believe that Brett Bielema is a guy who can get them back, maybe not to winning conference titles on a regular per se, but at least being a competitive team and a bowl eligible team every year.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, we're going to go ahead and play a previously recorded video that I shot with Ryan Evan. He goes really in depth. It is a lengthy interview, guys. You're going to get tons of information that are going to help you guys out this year in knowing about the Fighting Illini this season and where they stand and where they're heading. So hang tight. Here comes the interview with Ryan. And welcome back to the OHIO podcast, everybody. And we are now joined by our special guest, Ryan Evan from the Keepin It Orange and Blue podcast. Ryan is the Illini representative of the College Huddle. And Ryan, I couldn't have a better guest on tonight to talk about the Illinois Fighting Illini this upcoming season than you, my friend. Welcome to the OHIO podcast.
Hey, my pleasure to be here. And yeah, man, I'm ready to roll, and I'm excited. Football season's almost here. I'm one of the maybe handful. I'd say maybe there's a few thousand Illini fans that are just as into football as basketball, and I'm one of them. So yeah, I'm excited. A lot going on with Brett Bielema in this off season.
Yeah, let's just start there. Are you
Okay.
guys a football school, or are you a basketball school?
I think it's definitely a basketball school that does, even though it's there's nice gaps in between. There's been some very good football moments. I don't know, and you as an Ohio State fan can kind of remember back in the early to mid '90s, Illinois had their way with Ohio State.
Well, that was John Cooper, by the way.
Oh yeah, okay. Yes, I mean you still are the Ohio State, right? I mean, it was I think it was the Kirk Herbstreit years, but
oh gosh, don't remind me.
Oh my goodness,
I didn't realize that was my childhood, Ryan. It's a nightmare.
I didn't realize how average he was as a quarterback. I thought he was like really good, but then I'm like, Illinois like mopped him up. When I look at those highlights, but they also had Kevin Hardy and Simeon Rice and stuff like that. So there was a lot going on. But Illinois can be a bowl team. That is good for Illinois football fans. Like making a bowl game and being right there. And actually, Brett Bielema has this team competitive, and he has them competitive and winning some big games. And even when they lose. This isn't the same old Illini program. Lovie Smith had one good year where they got to a bowl game. Good year, 6-6. But every other year it was 4-8 or 3-9. Brett Bielema has had 2 5-7 seasons that they've blown 3 late leads in the fourth quarter that everybody kind of thought, hey, this is actually a pretty solid team. And then they had the 8-win season where they had a New Year's Day bowl when they had all those really good players and who got drafted in the first 3 rounds. So I think Brett Bielema's got rounding it into form. He also needs to, Eric, because you can't go 3 of your first 4 years and not make a bowl game and not make a bowl game, no matter how good or competitive you are. At the end of the day, it's about wins and losses. And they need to get back to a bowl game this year because they've got some good recruiting momentum. And they've actually had some key pickups this offseason, which I'm excited to talk to you about too. So
excellent. Yeah, we'll get to the roster here in a minute, but let's start here. You're talking a lot about Brett Bielema. I had his numbers pulled up here. He's 18-19, so just one game under 500. You've mentioned it. There's been about 5 or 6 games you guys have blown leads in the fourth quarter, or that record would look a lot different. Went to a bowl game 2 years ago in 2022, the ReliaQuest Bowl. Yeah, that was an 8-5 season for you guys. You went 5-4 in the conference, and then the other 2 years you're just one game away. So what is that the big story this offseason for the Illini going into 2024? Is getting that one more win, getting bowl eligible, or are there some other key storylines that Ohio State fans and college football fans should be aware of when it comes to Brett Bielema and the Fighting Illini this season?
Well, I would say, yeah, getting back to a bowl game is huge, I think, just for the program and momentum, and building that. It's hard to sell like, hey, we're really making strides here, but we've missed a bowl game 2 years ago. It's like 2 years in a row. I think it's defensively, I think, Illinois had one of the best defenses in the Big Ten a couple of years ago. And then, Ryan Walters took the job at Purdue. He took a couple of the defensive assistants with him. And when you lose guys like Devin Witherspoon and Sidney Brown and Quan Martin, all guys who are starting in the NFL who did their rookie seasons, So that's a big hit. So Brett Bielema promoted Aaron Henry, who was his defensive backs coach, to be their defensive coordinator. So I think a lot of it is how much better can this defense get? They added some key pieces like Terrence Brooks, a starter off of a national semifinal Texas team. So that's a really big pickup at the cornerback position. And they're getting some key pieces like Matthew Bailey back defensively. Can this defense be good enough to hold teams down to where this offense, who was a top 5 or 6 offense last year in the Big Ten with Barry Lunny, and they're expecting to be just as good, this year because they have a better offensive line and they added some key weapons like Zachary Franklin from Ole Miss. But can the defense do enough and improve enough to give this team a chance to win games? Because Eric, if you saw, they beat Indiana 45-44 in overtime in the second to last week of the year. And then they lose 46-44 to Northwestern on senior night, which would have put them in a bowl game. And the defense blew a huge lead against Wisconsin a few weeks before that. It's just the defense just drove everybody nuts, and it's really, can this defense get back to where it needs to be? And remember, Brett Bielema is a defensive guy. Like, he was a defensive coach on Belichick's staffs at New England. He played defense at Iowa. He was defensive coordinator at Wisconsin before he took the job. Defense is really his calling card. So you can't. I know he's not happy with having like the second worst defense in the Big Ten.
So let's talk. You talked about some of those players that you lost. My pick last year was for Big Ten defensive MVP was Newton. I think that was a pretty good guess on my part.
Yes.
Maybe not necessarily a guess. It was a good prediction. The dude, his motor for his size was unbelievable. But let's talk roster and the big pieces that are no longer there that you're going to have to find replacements for.
Yeah. So you just mentioned the biggest one. So I know one of the things we were going to talk about is biggest loss. Well, obviously Johnny Jerjon Newton, who was Defensive Player of the Year in the Big Ten. That's kind of hard to replace. Who was drafted in the second round by the Commanders. And then they lost another piece. His buddy, Keith Randolph, who was a third team who had been a third team All Big Ten selection the year before. He had some injury issues last year, so he really wasn't able to be his full self, but he still played most of the year hurt, probably about 80%. So you're losing 2 really good guys on that defensive line. So the depth this year was huge. How is Illinois going to replace that on the defensive line, which is really where a lot of the worry is. And thankfully, Illinois kept guys like Seth Coleman and Alec Bryant and Gabe Jacas, who Gabe Jacas was, on the he was a freshman All-American at Illinois a couple years ago. He had kind of a sophomore slump, but they're expecting a huge junior season out of him. And having a guy like Seth Coleman who can be a big-time pass rusher. And I think they might be switching up some of their schemes on the D-line too. I know that they just picked up a guy. His name is Gentle Hunt. Okay, he was an FCS All-American at FAMU. He's got that same undersized chip on his shoulder. He's about right around 6 foot, 300 pounds, huge motor. He loved watching Newton play, and Illinois picked him up for some depth there on the inside the defensive lineman room. But they also got Dennis Briggs from Florida State, who is a contributor on the last couple seasons where you've seen Mike Norvell turn their seasons around. He's just a massive guy. And even though he was just a rotational piece at FSU, he's going to be a big-time contributor to help solidify that depth on the defensive line. And as I mentioned, One other thing, the cornerback situation was just a huge, what needs to happen here, because they lost Taz Nicholson, and then they had some transfers that really hurt, like Zachary Toby, who started most of the year last year. So picking up Terrence Brooks and then getting Torrey Cox from Ohio, who, by the way, Coach Corey Parker, their new corner defensive back coach from Toledo, he was the coach of Kenyon Lewis, who is the Eagles' first-round pick from Toledo. So Coach Parker has done a great job developing cornerbacks. So Brett Bielema and the staff went and hired him from Toledo, and he loved Torrey Cox at Ohio. So Ohio, he was. I mean, you're an Ohio guy, but at the University of Ohio, the Bobcats. Torrey Cox was a guy that really didn't get thrown out a lot. So they've solidified these pieces with some veteran guys that they were very young at last year. So I have a lot of faith and confidence that this defense will be better. Just how much better is really the question.
Yeah, exactly. And you guys know Brett saw Toledo up close and personal last year. He
Yep.
played the Rockets, and they were the MAC champion, if I'm not mistaken, last year.
Yeah, very good team. Only two teams
They're
beat
solid.
Toledo. Illinois got a late last-second field goal in week 1, and then they lost to the MAC championship game to a pretty good Miami of Ohio team. But still a very good Toledo team. And I got to be honest, I'm shocked Coach Candle hasn't got a job somewhere else.
He flirted with Ohio State as the offensive coordinator, but of course, when you get Chip Kelly, it's kind of you're going to go with the proven commodity there.
Yeah, I get it, but he's a very good coach, and I'll be shocked if in a year or two he's not somewhere else.
Yeah.
At least as an OC, if not a head coach at maybe like an American Athletic Conference team, something like that.
Right. Let's keep it with the roster here. Let's talk about some of the guys that we should know. Who are the big household names this year that Brett is really counting on?
Okay. So you want me to start offense and then get to defense back? Because I've been focused on defense,
Let's everybody loves the scores, right? Everybody loves big home runs. Let's start offense. Right on.
Okay. So offensively, Luke Altmaier is going to be their quarterback, the general. He was he was the starting quarterback for majority of the year last year until he got injured against Minnesota. And then they had the John Paddock resurgence, where Paddock came in and literally hadn't really played in 6 weeks and just threw 3 straight dimes and led a 80-yard touchdown drive to beat Minnesota. And then they let him come in, and then he threw the ball over the yard against Indiana, and they won that game. And then he had a great game against Northwestern, but they ended up losing because the defense couldn't stop anybody. So, but Luke Altmaier showed what type of character he has, because he had a very rough game against Penn State and then responded with some very, very good games later on in the year. Against Maryland, he had some huge throws in games where they went on the road and beat a pretty solid Maryland team in College Park. Luke Altmaier had a pretty good game against Wisconsin. He can run and pass, so he's very mobile for a quarterback. He's definitely not just a drop back passer. He came from Ole Miss as well. He got beat out by Jackson Dart, but they were close competition. So just for Ohio State fans to know, Luke Altmaier, was a guy that Lane Kiffin liked, and he was head-to-head against Jackson Dart, and Jackson Dart just beat him out in a close competition. But so he's a talented kid. And so there's a lot of faith and confidence in him to take another step in his development. He had a couple games where he threw, a couple interceptions, but he always seemed to bounce back. So he's the leader of the offense. But the key name for if any Ohio State fans watch Illinois play, Illinois has a running back. His name is Caden Fagan. Okay. And I'm not joking with you guys. He's 6'2", 6'3", 230, 240 pounds, and he's their running back. Okay. So he's very Derrick Henry-ish. And you got to remember, Bielema loves these type of running backs. So if you remember at Wisconsin, he'd have these John Clay type guys. He's kind of Beanie Wells-ish, Eric.
Oh, that's a name we're familiar with.
Yeah, he's just a big guy that's really more nimble than you would think. You wouldn't think a guy that's carrying that much weight could outrun safeties, and he can. He showed against Minnesota he had a breakaway touchdown that nobody could catch him. So he was a 4-star product too, by the way, a consensus 4-star. So, but a lot of schools wanted him to play linebacker. Illinois said, no, you can play running back for us. So he chose Illinois over some very good schools. And he's going to be relied on heavily. And then his backup will be a local product named Aiden Lawfrey. And then they have another junior named Josh McCray, who has very good size as well. He just has fought so much injury issues over his two plus years that really hasn't been dependable. So that's what you're looking at in the background. Now, throwing the ball. So I know Ohio State, they love to sling it around. So Illinois lost Isaiah Williams, who was Marvin Harrison's counterpart. Here we go. On the first team All Big Ten last year. So you had Isaiah Williams and Marvin Harrison. So Illinois did have first team offensive player. Obviously, they're two different types of players. But Isaiah Williams landed on the Lions. Sounds like he's got himself some guaranteed money coming. So we loved him. We miss him. He set some. I think he has the most receptions in a single season in Illinois history. I think he had the most receptions in the Big Ten too. He was just a machine. So replacing him is big. So how is Illinois going to do that? So they just went and picked up Zachary from Ole Miss. Sorry, real quick. Pat Bryant is huge. Zachary Franklin, from Ole Miss, who Illinois' offensive coordinator Barry Lunny came from UTSA, and he had some very successful years at UTSA, and he knows Franklin from those years. Was their best receiver the years he was there with Lunny. Didn't really work out for him at Ole Miss. He dealt with some injury issues, but Lunny was able to bring him back this year. He's a guy that put up 1,000-yard seasons, near 20 touchdowns, stuff like that. He's a very, very, very good, talented receiver. So they brought him in, and then they've got Pat Bryant, who was, I think, their second leading pass catcher last season, and then a 4-star recruit named Malik Elzy, who was a freshman last year, who there's just a lot of talent there. He just wasn't ready yet last year. But this year, he's put on more muscle. He's got more confidence, and they're expecting big things out of those guys. So offensively, I'm super excited for this offense. They also added a FCS All-American tight end named Cole Rusk, who I think Illinois fans are going to get to see a lot of and use him in a couple different formations. So offensively, those are the names that, if any Ohio State fans watching Illinois, those are the guys that are going to be making the noise. And I could talk O-line, but that's as much as you probably like it. I would say you're not going to hear tons about, how all the offensive linemen and all the, what they're doing and all that. So
give me a letter grade for the offensive line. Like if A's like, this is the best offensive line we had, or a 1 through 10, 10 being the best offensive line we've ever had, 1 being this is the absolute worst offensive line we have.
Okay. Well, last year gets like a 5, 5.5, because Altmaier was running for his life. The first 2 or 3 weeks, they were so in disarray, and they weren't really sure who their top 6 or 7 guys were. That's not going to be a problem this year. So they picked up J.C. Davis in the transfer portal. He was one of the top 2 or 3 coveted offensive linemen in the country. I think he was graded as a top 5 offensive lineman in the nation last year from New Mexico. And they picked him up. And I would say right now that offensive line, just what I'm thinking going into the season, is at least a 7. Okay? I would say 7, which is good enough to get the job done and win you some games. Get to a bowl game. But I can be pleasantly surprised and it be an 8. I'm going to leave it there. Like,
If
I'm
it's
leaving that door open.
if it's a 7 with the physical back you have and the veteran gunslinger, pretty good offense, man.
Yeah. And I mean, and as much as people might think, if you look back at Illinois' stats last year offensively, very, very productive. Yes, throwing the ball was a big deal, but Illinois was a top 5 offense in the Big Ten last year.
All right. Give me one strength on this team and one weakness.
Okay.
Asking you to be brutally honest about that weakness.
Okay. Yes, that's fine. I would say the strength is the offense, the weapons on offense, and having another year behind them with Barry Lunny, and Luke Altmaier having another season to get ready and prepare. I would say the strength is definitely the offense. The weakness, I would say, is just the uncertainty of the defensive line and how good is Aaron Henry going to be as a defensive coordinator in year 2? Because there was just a lot of confusion and a lot of guys. Like they hired a defensive backs coach and fired him in one season. Like he was kind of the scapegoat. Aaron Henry wasn't going to get fired in his first year after Walters left. So they had to make the defensive backs coach the scapegoat. And so it's like you can't have another year like that with Aaron Henry as defensive coordinator. So it's how good can the defensive line be, and is year 2 going to be that much bigger for Coach Henry? Because it has to be. So the weakness, brutally honest, is the defensive line has to step up, because it was without Johnny Newton last year. It was not very good.
Gotcha. All right, let's talk a little bit about this schedule, man. So it's very interesting this year. Everybody has 2 byes. And so I kind of want to look at the schedule in 3 different sections.
Okay.
You have the first 5 games before your first bye. So you have the first game in August and the 4 games in September. You have Eastern Illinois at home. Kansas is a return game, kind of a rivalry game, sounds like.
Yep.
And they're coming to your place this year. Then you get Central Michigan at home. And then you go on the road to start Big Ten play, back-to-back games at Nebraska, which they're super high. Their fans are super high on their team. They're always super high on their team.
Yeah.
But now this year, it seems like they're really drinking the Kool-Aid juice. And then you're at Penn State. So out of those 5 games, what would be, in your mind, what you think the expectations should be record-wise?
I think 3-2
Okay.
is where you need to be to feel comfortable about going on to a bowl game. And I don't care if it's win the first 3, because the game against Kansas at home is going to be a very winnable game, even though Illinois will probably be the underdog. I think Kansas with Jalen Daniels is going to be the favorite, just because how electric he can be. And I think they'll be ranked too. I think Kansas will probably be in the upper teens to mid 20s. Probably, like I said, between 18 and 25, they'll be in there somewhere. And this will be a big chance for Illinois to boost, get you momentum heading into Big Ten play. It's been a long time since Illinois was 3-0 heading into Big Ten play. And I think that sounds funny for Ohio State fans, but Illinois is usually 2-1 going into Big Ten. That's usually how it is. And then, Illinois fights when they get to a bowl game. They get that 6th win usually in the second or the last game of the year. Second to last game of the year seems to be kind of how it goes. But I think getting to 3-0 is huge for them, because then you got momentum. And I think I think the Nebraska game definitely is a winnable game. I think Nebraska may be better this year, but I think Illinois is better than they were last year. I think Nebraska still has to prove and get over that hump of they're just not – they're going to be tough at home. They haven't been that – I would say – how's the best way to say this? Their home field really hasn't been an advantage for them. I think Illinois went in there and won 2 or 3 in a row. And that's true. I mean, Nebraska did come in and beat Illinois last season in Champaign, It was one of Illinois' worst games on offensively all year. If Illinois, who had a top 5 offense last year, just played half as good as they did the rest of the season, they'd have won the game. But they were just terrible.
All right.
But I would say 3-2. But I think let's say they lose to Kansas, you got to win that Nebraska game. So I think being 3-2 heading into that next 5 is huge for Illinois.
Yeah, because coming off that bye, the next 4 games, I won't say they're brutal, but it's definitely it's definitely the heart of the schedule. You get 3 of the 4 at home though, which is interesting. So you get Purdue at home, you get the cheaters from up north at home.
Mm-hmm.
You go on the road to take on Oregon, and then you get Minnesota at home. Are you thinking 2-2?
Yes. Yep. I think 2-2. I think winning the Purdue and the Minnesota games I think the revenge factor with. I can tell you one thing about Brett Bielema. He takes some of this stuff personal behind the scenes. He'll never let you know it. But if you look at some of his pasts at Wisconsin and Arkansas, anytime a team would run the scores up on him, he never forgets it. And Purdue ran that score up on Illinois last year. When the game was over, Illinois had their backups in and tossing, just trying to get some guys minutes. And Purdue was just throwing it all over the yard. They were up, I think it was like 40-12 or something, and then they were just like throwing it all over the yard. And Illinois had their second and third string guys in, just trying to get them some minutes. And Brett Bielema's not going to forget that. So, and Ryan Walters is returning to Champaign, and there's still plenty of guys on this team that were recruited by Ryan Walters, guys in the secondary. There's at least 2 of them. And there's a bunch of guys on the defense that remember him too. He was their defensive coordinator, Seth Coleman, Alec Bryant, guys I've mentioned already. And these guys aren't going to forget that. And Brett Bielema will not let them forget that. So I expect Illinois to win the game in Champaign against Purdue. And who knows, go have some fun against Michigan. What do you got to lose?
Yeah. Well, you guys had them on the ropes 2 years ago. That game was yours, man, and the refs stole that thing.
Let's be honest, and this isn't just because you're Ohio State fans. Ohio State fans and Illinois fans can rest on this. We all know that Illinois won that game.
Yeah.
Not only was J.J. McCarthy's knee was down, too, by the way, on that 4th down play, where it looked like he was sacked, and he just he got rid of the ball before his knee hit the ground. If anybody goes back and watches a replay of that, you can zoom in on it. He was down, and it was 4th down. So it doesn't matter about the pass interference on Witherspoon that they just made a flag up. He was down on 4th down at midfield. It would have been Illinois ball, and they could have ran the clock out. So Illinois fans know that they got that game stolen from them. But again, too, and how good is Michigan really going to be this year, Eric? I don't know that.
They're good, but they have no depth. They are a couple defensive lineman injuries away from being a very mediocre football team, in my opinion.
Yes, and you know what?
And offensively,
that's another thing. Quarterback, running back. I mean,
yeah, they got Donovan Edwards still at running back, and he's coming off of a disappointing season from last season. He had a much better year as a sophomore.
The quarterback's really the question, though, is the quarterback.
Yeah. They're going to run the football, yeah. Alex Orji can't throw the football. That spring game was an absolute joke. It was a disaster for them. They are going to rely on the run. That's literally every team's going to be putting 8 guys in the box and daring them to throw the football over the top of them. It'll be very interesting. And I said,
that's going to be an electric atmosphere in Champaign, because I can tell you what, Illinois and Michigan have had some big battles over the years. It's not a rivalry like you guys, but there's some big tradition with Illinois and Michigan. They going into Michigan, beating Schembechler in the 90s when they had some really good teams. And, I think Illinois beat them 10 or 12 years ago when we had Juice Williams we put I think they beat them 48-14. It was one of the biggest schlackings in the Big House ever, and then there's been some big time matchups that Illinois felt like they got robbed. a couple of years ago was one, and there was a very close game 3 or 4 years ago, even when Lovey, I think it was one of Lovey's last years where I think it was like 48-35. Like Illinois played Michigan actually really well. It doesn't, I don't know why. They just always seem to match up with them and play them pretty good. And there's nothing for this team to lose. And that's going to be an electric one that all fans, when Michigan comes to Champaign, I want, Ohio State fans to know this. There is Illinois fans can't stand Michigan. They can't stand Michigan fans. So I want you guys to know that. Like Illinois fans just give them
mutual.
They give them hell when they come. Like it's just muck, fish again, all the fun stuff. So I want Ohio State fans to know that like they're going to give them hell, and I think Illinois is going to give them a run for their money. But I'm not going to sit here and just go down the line and be like we're beating Michigan, we're beating Oregon, because then nobody take me serious. So I'm going to say 2-2 is fair. So I'm thinking then we're at 5-4, right? That's 5-4.
Yep. And then you got 3 games in the month of November after the Minnesota and then the bye. Home against Michigan State, then you finish on the road at Rutgers, at Northwestern. I'm not going to say
that's 3 winnable ones. 3 winnable ones. I'm not
going to say you're going to win all 3, but
no.
they are 3 games that you have a chance to win. And so if that's the case, then the ceiling for this football team is 8-4, correct?
Yes. I believe that 100%. That is the ceiling.
Okay.
I don't know if they'll hit the ceiling, but I'm going to, we're on our podcast, Keepin Orange and Blue, me and Kevin are going to go over in detail and do our picks and select. Kevin's not as sold. He's a harder sell on this stuff than me, but I think 6 wins is very attainable, Eric, if you've looked and we went over their schedule. Would you agree?
Vegas says you're 5.5, so the money's on the 6.
Yeah. So, and look, we would love to be 8-4, and we would be thrilled with that. Like the 8-4 at Illinois gets you New Year's Day bowls, and we're just heck, we're going to Tampa, right? So I know the way Ohio State fans are. And Eric, and I've always wanted to say this with Ohio State fans, it's so crazy just to see just the level and the standard of Ohio State football and what Ryan Day goes through at 11-1, and Illinois is 5-7, keeping coaches and giving them raises and extensions, and people are they love. Guess what? Illinois was 5-7 last year, and Illinois has now surpassed their season ticket total that they just was a record last year. And Illinois sold more season tickets than they did last year. And Ryan Day is trying to get ran out of town. It's
I would say the way you could explain it is the way you guys attack your fandom attack college basketball is how we attack college football. Like we are so college football hungry that even during basketball season, we're talking college football. And I see a lot of that with the Illini fans. A lot of they're super into basketball.
Yeah.
And so you admitted such at the beginning of the podcast. You're a basketball school that's every now and then pretty good at football. So if 8-4 is the ceiling, now I'm going to ask the hard part.
Yeah.
Let's say things don't go well. What's the floor?
I'm gonna say 4-8.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm going to say 4-8. I think there's just so much talent on that offense. I don't see how they can't win more than 4 games. I think, especially because I think you got 2 gimmies, in my opinion, with Eastern and Central. Central's not been good. And Eastern, while they're a nice FCS program, and their coach has them, pretty decent. They're a decent FCS school now. They've been in the top 25. It's just there's still a big difference there. There's a big gap. And then I just think you also factor in, you got Purdue, Minnesota, Michigan State at home, and the Northwestern game is going to be at Wrigley Field, which is going to be I'm going to be honest, it's always pro Illinois, when it's at Wrigley, and who knows how good David Braun's going to be in year 2, because they lost they lost their starting quarterback, that's just randomly. So, and they always play Rutgers pretty well. It's going to be an ugly game. It's going to be a muck game. Low scoring, they're going to chop some wood. They're going to chop the wood. And I still think they'll come out of there with a couple more wins. Think about that. What if they just win half of those games I just told you? That's 2 more wins, right? So I think there's
That'd be seven.
as we mentioned,
Yeah,
8.
that'd be seven. If you won 2 of those 3, you'd be 7-5.
But I mean, like if Illinois just beat Central and Eastern, if Illinois wins 2 more of those 5 or 6 winnable games that I was mentioning, which is still not a good margin, then you're at 4 wins. So I think that's the floor is 4, and the ceiling is 8. So
Okay.
and I think Illinois will be in the middle of that.
I think that's fair. I think that sounds right. All right. Now, my next question was going to be expectations, but it sounds like we've kind of already covered that. So, I'm going to ask you a question. I'm having a debate with our new West Coast members,
Okay.
and Jr. completely disagrees with me on this one, and I want to get your take. I believe, and this is kind of an interesting question for you because you guys only play Oregon out of the 4 new ones, and we only play Oregon as well. We don't get Washington or UCLA or USC this first year.
Yeah, but you guys get them usually in the postseason, so you're fine. Okay.
Okay. My theory is this, and this will be my last question for you. I believe as the season wears on, so after we get through like the once we get into the late October into November, the West Coast teams are going to struggle mightily against the regular old Big Ten teams because of the physicality of the play in Big Ten that they are not accustomed to on the West Coast. Some have responded to this question by saying it ain't going to take that long. It's going to be right away. And then some disagree with me completely. What's your take on that? Is there going to be a little bit of a rude awakening for the 4 new teams who were in the Pac-12, who are now Big Ten members, when it comes to the physicality of Midwestern football?
Yeah, I think you know what? I think it makes perfect sense, and I think I would agree with you that at some point towards maybe the end of maybe the middle towards the end of the year, I think it'll really show itself, because I think with anything in that sense, it takes some getting used to, right? Anything takes some getting used to when it's not your normal routine. It's not what you see every day. And I think the week in, week out grind of Big Ten football, I think eventually they'll get accustomed to it. I don't think it's going to be in the first season though. So while I never really thought about it, that's why it's a great question. I'm not one of the people who are going to say, oh, it's going to happen right away, because in my opinion, it takes, the first month or 6 weeks to really start to see things wearing down on teams. And eventually, as the season goes on, I think those last few weeks, I think you'll really see it too. Plus, you never know. I know it's football, but the travel schedule for them, some weeks they might be 2 weeks in a row they're flying cross country, and that could take a toll on teams as well, even though it's still not basketball. But just getting used to this, like the whole schedules are going to be thrown off. It's just Big Ten teams are ready for them. They're not going to have to adjust as much as those Pac-12 teams are going to have to adjust to Big Ten teams.
Yeah, you bring up an interesting point about the travel. Think about this: even a flight from LA to Washington, Seattle, or vice versa, is about like flying from Penn State to Nebraska. Okay?
Yeah.
Even though they're in the same time zone, the distance there, north to south, is a lot more than what people realize. The travel's really going to wear on them because, like, the only close game they have is Oregon and Washington are close, and of course the crosstown rival. Everything else for them is going to be. It's not a bus ride. It's not like
Can you think of this? Oregon and Penn State, or Oregon and Rutgers. That's literally the entire United States. Those are like what, 8 or 9 hour flights? Like
I think it's well, yeah, I think it's like 6 or 7 hour flight. Like it's not,
7 hours. That's like you're taking your whole day up the next day.
Yeah, well, yeah.
To get on the plane, to board, to get your stuff. That's like a 9-hour adventure for some of these teams the next day. When most teams are recuperating at home, they're ready. These teams are going to be like, well, hey, we got to get on the plane. We're not recuperating. We just got to get back home. So yeah, that is going to be there's going to be a big adjustment, no doubt.
Absolutely. Ryan, this has been a lot of fun, my man. Tell everybody where they can find the Keeping It Orange and Blue podcast and where they can follow you at.
All right. You can follow me on X at 200 Columns Rye, and our kind of our podcast page and website page is at 200 Columns. But most importantly, Keeping It Orange and Blue is the podcast. It's on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube. And we're on the College Huddle site, which we're proud to be a part of. So any Illini info you guys care about, we're there. And we appreciate it, no doubt. Thanks for having me on, Eric.
Hey, Ryan, it's been my pleasure, my man. Been a lot of fun. Good luck this season. I don't know that our paths will cross unless something crazy thing happens and Illinois goes 11-1 and is in the playoff, and then maybe we will. Or actually, if that ever happened, we'd be seeing each other in Indy, my man. If that happens, you and I are going to go have ourselves a good time in Indianapolis. All right.
Oh, definitely.
And thank you, Ryan, and the Keeping It Orange and Blue podcast for joining us for our first interview and our first preview of the 2024 season. And as you heard, Chris, Ryan is very optimistic that Brett Bielema is going to get things turned around this year and that they have a shot of becoming bowl eligible. He said it. The floor is probably only 4 wins. The ceiling is somewhere around 8. So the middle ground feels right at 6-6.
Yeah.
So that's kind of where they're at. So let's take a quick look, Chris, at their roster. And I'm going to pull over my screen here. And this is the roster for on Overlads.
Mm-hmm.
Our lads for the Fighting Illini. So this is their prediction coming out of spring ball. And of course, if they're in orange, that means that they're a new addition, whether it be a transfer or a freshman. So let's look at quarterback and Caden Fegan, however you want to pronounce that. That's the running back. Luke Altmaier, experienced quarterback. And as you heard Ryan say, Caden Fegan is a horse of a running back. Cole Rusk was really high on our tight end list. That's a weapon. And then looking at the receivers, they got some new guys here. So the passing game should be interesting. I think this is definitely a run-first team, which is the way Brett Bielema likes it. And I think when they go to the air, the tight end might be the number one target there. On the offensive line, they're returning 3 starters on the offensive line. So I'm feeling pretty good about this Illinois offense. Chris, what do you think offensively about the Fighting Illini in 2024?
I think they've got a chance to be a really solid offense. Love their running back. I like Altmaier a lot. I think he's got a lot of upside. You look at Cole Rusk. I think Cole Rusk is a tremendous talent. If he can get the same kind of performance that he had at Murray State, that's going to be a huge step. And, they do have a lot of new guys in the receiving core. But, they do return last year's 3rd leading receiver in Pat Bryant, who had 43 catches, 560 yards, and 7 touchdowns, Eric. I mean, not bad stats.
7 touchdowns, pretty good.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, this is a team that's got some offensive firepower. I think this may be the most offensive weapons that Brett Bielema has had to play with all around. The running backs, he's had good running backs over the course of the last few years, no doubt about it. But as far as an all-around offense, I think this may be the best he's had since he got to Champaign.
All right, let's flip it around and look at the defense, which defensively last year, they had the All-Big Ten Defensive Player of the Year, Newton, on the defensive line. Replacing him is going to be key, like Ryan said. Defensively, I've got some concerns here, but the thing is Brett Bielema is a defensive guy, just like Ryan said. Taking a look of them up front, Alex Bray, Edwards, and the new guy Briggs. We'll see if they can get some continuity there. Linebacker, you've got Gabe, Jacobs, Odaluga, Rosick, and Coleman. And then in the defensive backfield, you've got Toby, Bailey, Scott, Strain, and the other Scott. So a couple Scotts there, Miles and Xavier Scott. There's a lot of question marks on this defense for me, Chris. I question if Illinois defensively is going to be able to hang this season especially with some of the better offensive teams that they're going to play.
Yeah, yeah. I'll tell you. I actually, I do like a couple of their linebackers. I mean, if you look at Rosick, I think he is a tremendous linebacker. Led the team last year with 82 tackles. Um, but I'll tell you what, I think they're going to have a hard time replacing Newton.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
I mean, that was 7.5 52 tackles, 7.5 sacks last year, Eric. I mean, the guy was a beast. So, I mean, I look, Coleman's solid. He can get you some sacks. He had 6 last year. But I'm with you. I think I've got some defensive concerns. But I think that their offense is going to be good enough to keep them in some games. Given their schedule against the opponents they have, I think that their offense can win them some games and their defense can keep it close enough. You know, like I said, I don't think this is not an 8, 9, 10 win team, but I don't think 6 is out of the question.
All right, so let's talk about where we think they're at. So, Illinois' schedule this year, they start off at home against Eastern Illinois, and then they host Kansas, a much improved Kansas team, and then they host Central Michigan. That is their non-conference schedule. I see 2 wins there.
Yeah, I agree. I think they go 1-2, or I'm sorry, 2-1, taking a loss to Kansas.
Now, the next 2 are on the road to start Big Ten play. At Nebraska, at Penn State. Ryan's hoping that they can take one of those 2. He feels the Nebraska one is probably the one that is probably closer to a game that Illinois could win than Penn State. I'm not so sure. I think they're probably going to drop both those games.
Yeah, I agree. Sorry, Ryan. I just don't see them. Don't see them doing it. I think they come out of their first 5 games at 2-3. I'm sorry, 1-4 rather. 1-4.
No, 2-5.
2-5.
Yep. Against Eastern Illinois, Central Michigan. I have them at 2-5 at that point.
Yes.
Then they get their first bye in the first week of October. And then the next 4 games, 3 of them are at home. They get Purdue at home, Michigan at home before going out to Eugene and taking on the Ducks, and then coming back home and taking on the Golden Gophers of Minnesota. I have them winning 2 here. I think they can beat Purdue at home.
Agreed.
I think they can beat Minnesota at home. I think Michigan's got too much firepower for them. I think they're going to take a solid L at Oregon. But you know what? Circle that Michigan one because Illinois played them tough 2 years ago.
Yes.
And had that game won, and they haven't forgotten that. They don't like them in Illinois. They get that game at home, and like we've talked about, if Alex Orji's not doing very well at quarterback and hasn't improved, and they might be an injury or 2 on defense for the Maize and Blue, watch out if you're a Michigan fan. Illinois can win this game. I don't think they will, but they can.
Yeah, 2 years ago, if not for the refs, they do win that game. But
yes,
you know, I don't see it happening if Michigan is at full strength and Alex Orji is playing at least he doesn't have to be playing great football, but if he's playing good football at that point, I think they've got enough to beat Illinois. They're going to get just absolutely lambasted at Oregon. The only thing that Brett Bielema can hope there is that he keeps Oregon under 50.
Stay healthy, boys.
That's it. Stay healthy. That's all you got. Yeah, I'm with you. I think they got what it takes to beat Purdue at Champaign. I think they can go on the road and probably upset what I think is going to be a down Minnesota team.
They get their second bye on November 9th before coming home for Senior Day and taking on Sparty on November 16th. Then they finish the season out on the road at Rutgers, at Northwestern. I think they can win against Sparty at home. I
Yes.
think they're going to take an L against Rutgers. That one's at New Jersey, and I think that is going to be a much improved Rutgers team. And then they
Agreed.
finish. I have them at 5-6, and then they're on the road at Northwestern, playing in Chicago at Wrigley Field. I think Brett Bielema has his boys up to get bowl eligible, and they do beat Northwestern on November 30th. I have Illinois finishing 6-6 overall, 4-5 in Big Ten play.
Yeah, I'm right there with you, and we've even got the same wins there, Eric. This is a team that, as I look, could get sneaky. Be sneaky good and get up to 7 wins. I think is, I know that they said on the Illinois guys said it was going to be 8. They had 8 as their ceiling. I think 7 is the ceiling for this team. And I think the best they do is 6. But I'll tell you, it's going to be bowl eligible, and that is something for the Illinois faithful to be, I think, pleased about. And I think it's something that Brett Bielema can build on for next season.
JR has them going 4-8, 2-7 overall, so he has them losing 2 other games that we don't. And I have his schedule that he sent me. So, would you like to take a stab at which 2 games he has them losing that we have them winning?
He has them losing Purdue.
That is incorrect.
No. I really, because he seems to like Purdue. Northwestern.
Incorrect. He went 0 for 2.
That's weird for me.
Minnesota and Michigan State is who he has them losing to.
See, and with both those being home games, I don't get it, Eric. I don't get it. I mean, I can understand the Northwestern. I can understand it's a road game. You want to give the advantage. Of course, is it a road game? I mean, I guess it is.
For both?
For both.
There will probably be, as Ryan said, there will probably be more Illinois fans at Wrigley Field than Northwestern fans, more than likely.
Yeah. Well, that's just because there are more. I mean, Northwestern has 18 fans.
So they have a little more than that. They have a lot of students, I guess you could say. Yeah. Alumni. So Illinois is going to be super interesting. At 5.5 wins where Vegas has them, I'm staying away here. I think that I have them at 6. They very well could go 5-7, and then you lose if you're taking the over. I think Vegas wisely has them at 5.5, and that is a gamble. If you're going to go either way there, I'm probably staying away from Illinois, where I won some money off Illinois 2 years ago. I'm going to stay away from Illinois this year and not bet on that one. But my prediction is 6-6.
Yeah, I agree.
I feel good about that.
I do too. And their schedule is not the toughest schedule.
No, it's fair. That's how I would word it. It's a fair schedule. The trip to Oregon, they get Michigan at home. They have to go to Penn State. Although I'll be honest with you, the trip to Piscataway, New Jersey, might have me a little. Like that one might, they might think, Rutgers is a team we can beat. I'm at this point, I'm thinking Rutgers might actually be more difficult out than Penn State. Just kind of my feelings on the matter right now.
I don't disagree.
So yeah, that's kind of where I'm at with Illinois. My overall thoughts here as we close out this preview. We hope you've enjoyed it and that you have found this informative when making your decisions and getting into the season here in the Big Ten. My thoughts with Illinois are this. This is going to be a team, I think, who is going to be in a lot of close ball games. And usually when you're in close ball games, the coaches who are more defensive minded tend to win those games.
Yeah.
I think Illinois got good leadership on offense. I think they're going to be improved offensively. And we'll see if Brett Bielema can get this defense squared away. They've not been the same since Ryan Walters left as defensive coordinator and headed over to West Lafayette to be the Purdue head coach. I think after the beatdown they took by Purdue last year, I think Brett Bielema and the boys get their revenge against the Boilermakers this year. I think that'll be a big win for them. I think they're going to be in some close games, and when it's all said and done, I think they're going to go bowling at 6-6.
Yeah, I agree. And you know what I'd love to see, Eric, is I'd love to see them beat Purdue and then have Brett Bielema hop on the little train and drive it around the field.
They're gonna bring the train to Champaign, are they?
Yeah, let's bring the train to Champaign and let them hop on the train and drive it around the field.
The boiler special, isn't that what they call it? The boiler special. Brett's gonna break it if he hops on there. Just
I
saying.
don't know. You have to ask Big Mac Mary what the name of that thing is, Eric.
The boiler special. And then I think they have two different ones. But anyways, long story short, yeah, I think that's where we're at with Illinois. Any last thoughts about them before we head on out of here?
No, I'm with you. I just feel like they're going to be a team that's in a lot of close games. I think that, like you said, not only defensive-minded coaches, but good coaches win close games. And Brett Bielema is a good coach. As much as I like to make fun of him, as much as we all do, for his crying about Ohio State, he is a good, solid coach, and I think that he's going to get this team on the right track.
Yeah, Illinois is supposed to be a rival of Ohio State's. That they have that stupid Illabuck trophy, which means absolutely nothing. Apparently, according to EA Sports, it's one of the greatest rivalry trophies ever made. If you watch their little preview that they had, the commercial they had.
Yeah.
We don't play them this year. How many Illinois games do you think you'll catch?
Not many. I'm not going to lie. There's a few that are intriguing.
A couple Friday night games, I think.
I think there's a few that's intriguing. I would probably watch them versus Wisconsin because I think Wisconsin's a team we're going to want to watch as well. Just because they're always an interesting play. And then, of course, if they're playing the West Coast teams, I might turn them on just to kind of get a feel for how the Big Ten West Coast guys are playing. So,
all right. Fair enough. Hit that like button. We surely do appreciate you watching, taking the time out of your busy day to watch this. If you're listening to it on any of the listening devices where you get your podcasts, make sure you give us a 5-star review. We really do appreciate that. If you're not already, please subscribe, ring the bell, get notified every time we go live. This is just one of 18 previews coming your way. We've got 17 more. The next one, I believe, is going to be Indiana. So
a lot of previews.
Yeah, Chris, we don't get a summer break this year. It's just
it sounds like
them out.
It almost sounds like we got a job doing this thing, Eric.
It feels that way, absolutely. But we enjoy doing it, and we wouldn't have it any other way.
That's
right. By the way,
this
is how we make a little extra scratch on the side. We get into these things, we figure some things out, and we know which teams to avoid and which teams to lay some coin down on. So if that's you, hopefully this will help you out. Again, hit that like button, share it, subscribe, ring the bell. Till next time, Chris, OH.
IO.
Go Bucks.